I'm really tired of people saying 2016 is like the worst year ever. I'm pretty sure that when the Mongols ruled fucking China, that was a pretty shitty fucking time, man.
There has to be a sense in which we think about what is the society we want to live
in. Well, hello! Welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I am sniffling like a motherfucker.
And we're going to do our best to get through this, even though it's cold, and it's gray, and it's winter. It's going to last you for the rest of your life. What movie is that from? Groundhog Day.
Shit, I wasn't even...
Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Let's run this sucker. All right, so we are going to start off this episode as we start off every episode with the Shitty Minute. It's basically a minute or so, usually longer, but we call it the Shitty Minute because it kind of sounds cool, and the idea theoretically is to have it be a minute-long rant about something that is pissing one of us off, and we alternate each week. And last week I had the Shitty Minute, so that means this week it's Sicky's turn for his Shitty Minute. So, Sicky, what's your Shitty Minute this week?
So originally my Shitty Minute was going to be about, like it usually is, something political.
Right.
I was going to use that, the idea of the fact that the American evangelicals about 5 or 6 years ago were the least likely to agree with the fact that the president's personal morality will affect their policy-making decisions and their performance as president. And that as of this year, they are the most likely demographic. It went from like 28% to like 71% to say that there's no effect on personal morality, has no effect on their performance as a president. And because I wanted to say pure ideology as many times as possible. But you know what? Evangelicals, you're off the hook. Because I have a new Shitty Minute. Mm-hmm. And it's not about politics. It's about Westworld.
Oh.
I know you like Westworld, Austin.
Hold on. Is this a spoiler alert?
No, not really.
Okay, no spoiler alert. Okay.
Westworld. I've only watched like 5 episodes, so I'm way behind. And the reason I've only watched 5 is because, dude, this show is like, it's just boring as shit. I can't do it. I'm really struggling. I want to watch it, and I always find myself reaching for my phone in the middle of the show, which I never do. I never do that. I hate doing that. But it's just, I don't know, man. The characters kind of suck. The dialogue's kind of lame. I don't care about, like, Mary Sue blonde robot. I don't care about James Marsden Cyclops. I don't care. They even make Ed Harris suck. Like, literally, Anthony Hopkins is the only reason I want to watch the show, and he's in, like, 3 minutes of every episode. But yet, something keeps bringing me back. It's got Jonathan Nolan. That's kind of bringing me back. Obviously, Anthony Hopkins is bringing me back. We're talking about consciousness.
Julian James,
Anthony Hopkins,
the breakdown of the bicameral mind.
He brought up bicameral theory. Holy shit, I want to hear this. And then it goes for like half an hour on some bullshit where Jacob from Lost is like hanging around and I don't know why. And then Ed Harris is doing some stupid shit in his black hat and it's like a little too on the nose. And then, man, I'm grading papers all day. And then I have to put on Westworld to escape from that. And I feel like I'm grading another freshman philosophy paper. And then there's some like maze coming up now. I don't even know what it's like an RPG's happening here. I feel like I'm going to spend 6 hours moving a boulder like I'm playing Ocarina of Time Zelda back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Bro, people making Westworld, it's pretty hard to fuck this up. Just stop. Just make it interesting. Get rid of the parts that suck. And make a show that I can actually watch and enjoy. It's really not that hard. That's my plea. I know they've already made it, and I'm already way behind. They need to go back and retroactively fix these problems. Just for me. Jonathan Nolan, I know you listen to this podcast. Do this for me.
You know how all these people were giving you a hard time and they were saying that we agree too much? The gauntlet has been thrown. We couldn't possibly disagree more.
Okay, sell me. Why am I wrong?
It's my favorite show on television, man.
What?
Yeah. I mean, Atlanta is, but Atlanta's over. So, the season finale. So, but currently it's my favorite show that is still going. I don't know, man. Obviously the philosophical underpinnings are really intriguing to me. What does it mean to be human? What is the origin of consciousness? This idea that these robots have these ghosts that they think are talking to them, or their memories that are talking to them. That's the sort of, the emergence of consciousness in the bicameral mind. I got really into Julian Jaynes for a while, like how many years ago? Remember that guy Gary Williams that used to be a blogger? And he was all about like Julian Jaynes and shit like that. Yeah. And he used to like fucking write these crazy essays. Like, I don't know if you guys are interested in reading like Pete Wolfendale length 10,000, 20,000 word blog posts. This guy named Gary Williams. I don't even remember what the name of his blog was, but if you Google Gary Williams, Julian Jaynes, and the bicameral mind, you'll find his website, I'm sure. And I got really into consciousness theory and stuff like that. So when they started, it was like the second or third episode, they said something about this. I was like, oh my God, this is fucking on the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. That's exactly what this is. Like, obviously Jonathan Nolan read some Julian Jaynes and was like interested in theories of consciousness or theories of the origins of consciousness, and was like, I'm going to make a fucking movie about this. So for me, there's that. But also, I think Ed Harris is a badass. I think his character is fucking intriguing as fuck. I'm curious.
Well, are you caught up? Is that the thing?
Well, I'm only one episode. I haven't seen the 9th episode. But still, you're 5 episodes in. By 5 episodes in, I was hooked. I will say this. Over the next few episodes, something, the leader or the head mistress of the madam, we'll say, of the whorehouse.
Yeah.
Have some weird shit started going on with her? I can't remember the 5th episode.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, it gets weirder. It gets more interesting. But I'm just really interested in that sort of that point, that shift at what is consciousness? What does it mean to have consciousness? At what point are you quote unquote real? And I know it's not the first time that people have ever explored that on television or film, but I think the way that it's doing it is really intriguing. I also love this place of Westworld where you go there to just fucking live out your libidinal desires. Anything you want to do, you just fucking do it. And then it's intriguing. Is that supposed to be the real authentic you, or is that just you playing at certain desires? Or I don't know. I just think there's something really interesting about the entire concept of the show. I'm balls in. I'm balls deep, man. I'm in.
I think this says a little bit more about you than it says about Westworld.
Yeah, maybe.
Jurassic Park with people? Yeah, it's kind of...
Well, dude, I actually Facebooked that exact same thing. I literally said that. I said that it is Jurassic Park with like a Western, and it is it's based on a Michael Crichton novel, so that makes sense.
Oh, it is? I didn't even know that.
Oh yeah, dude, it's based on a Michael Crichton
So he ripped
novel.
off himself?
Yeah, he ripped off himself. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I'm going to keep watching, man. Like, it's going to get into some RPG shit, and they're going to be running around talking to people for 6 hours, and I'm not going to give a shit, but I'll still do it. Whatever.
Yeah. Would you go to Westworld?
Nah.
You wouldn't go?
I don't give a shit. No.
See, I'd go because I grew up watching cowboy movies and wanting to be a cowboy. So any excuse that I'd have to be able to that's why even though everybody hates Back to the Future 3, I really like it because it goes back to the cowboy days, right? And I dig the fucking cowboy days. At least the sort of romantic idea that we have that whatever his name was, Wild Bill or whatever the fuck his name was that he created, But I love that romantic idea of the Western. So for me, I'd for sure go to Westworld.
I love Westerns. I love spaghetti Westerns, for sure. Sergio Leone stuff, yeah, it's some of my favorite. I mean, I feel like Red Dead Redemption is one of the greatest video games of all time. I'm not really much of a gamer, but that's fantastic. Yeah. And I feel like this is Red Dead Redemption, but you're doing it?
Yeah. And you wouldn't want to do that?
I guess some of the adventures would be kind of fun.
Yeah, that's what I feel like.
But I mean, even that would get kind of old. Like, you do one, and then it's like, okay, the rest of them are just like the same thing, and it would lose its sort of vigor and stuff eventually. I don't know.
Would you be able to release and just have that libidinal release? You think in Westworld if you went?
No, that's the thing is I would not have that. I'd be way too self-aware and self-conscious of the fact that this is fake and looking out for all the things that are programmed and all that. Plus, it would never be as sort of immersive as it is in the TV show.
Right. And it'd never be as satisfying to rescue the damsel and kill the bank robber because you'd know, that was all a setup. It was a game. So yeah, it wouldn't quite be as you said, it wouldn't be as immersive. And so I don't know if it would be as cathartic as they're making it seem that it is.
Yeah, the Uncanny Valley stuff would probably really affect me and gross me out and really be really creepy. And then I wouldn't enjoy it as much, I feel like. But who knows? We'll see.
Now, with that said, just so you know, all these dudes that are banging these robot hookers and shit like that, there is apparently a restaurant opening up in London that you go in for a cup of coffee and you get a blowjob. And I think it's like 70 pounds or 100 pounds. And basically they're going to have like these sex robots that suck you off while you get a cup of coffee. For real, dude. Bloristas. I am not making this up. I can't remember the dude's name, but he's some guy that's opening one up in like Denmark or Holland or some shit like that first, of course, right? And then he's going to bring it to London, I think, next year. So, I mean, this sex robot thing isn't really that far. And, I don't know if there's something for, other sexual preferences, if you don't want like a female sucking you off, but maybe they'll have... That's the thing, is when you hear about sex robots, it's always like chick sex robots that are hooking up with dudes. How come there's not the opposite? Now, in Westworld there is. But how come in the real world there's not? Is there just not demand?
Demand, yeah, it's just demand.
Like vibrators, I guess, are just sufficient enough, huh?
Technology is up to par, man.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We have to agree to disagree on this one, my friend. This could be the beginning of a long, tense battle over television shows. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll address this again once I've finished the season and see if I'm in the same place.
Fair enough.
Maybe we'll do an episode on Westworld when it's over. That'd be fun.
Let's do that.
Stay tuned for that, y'all. All right, so for our main segment this week, we talked about politics a lot recently. Maybe too much. And we're going to keep doing it because, what the fuck? Who gives? Who cares? It's kind of what we have to do. So we're going to talk this week a bit about identity politics and liberalism. It's been in the news a lot, especially in the op-ederati the last week or so. People talking a lot about identity politics. Did the Democrats lose the election because of their focus on identity politics? Has the right sort of grabbed hold of and made identity politics its new measure, and so maybe it won because of identity politics? Should the left ditch identity politics? All this kind of stuff. A lot of big questions here. We'll try and address many of them in the process. I think we should probably start by defining what exactly identity politics is, though. Yeah,
I think that's good. And then maybe we can even say a little bit kind of what kicked off the shitstorm.
What did you have in mind specifically?
Well, I was just going to quote what Bernie said.
Exactly.
So let me just quote that first, and then we can start chatting about identity politics and Judith Butler and Foucault or wherever the fuck the conversation is going to go. I just had a feeling those names were going to come up at some point. So, but anyway, okay. So Bernie was talking in where was he? I don't know where he was, but he was giving a talk, and he basically said, he was in Boston, and he said, one of the struggles that you're going to see in the Democratic Party is whether we go beyond identity politics. And he continued on to say that it's, enormously important to end all forms of discrimination and that representation does matter. He said, we need 50 women in the Senate. We need more African Americans. But then he also made a remark that said that representation alone is not enough. And he said, it is not good enough for someone to say, I'm a woman, vote for me. No, that's not good enough. What we need is a woman who has the guts to stand up to Wall Street, to the insurance companies, to the drug companies. And that basically set off a sort of chain reaction of discussions about, was this a slight on Hillary Clinton or directed at Hillary Clinton? Is this something bigger that needs to be addressed? What exactly is Bernie getting at? And I think a lot of discussions that have already been inaugurated by the election of Trump about the failure of the left. Like, what has the left done that has not allowed it to ascend to certain levels of power? Why hasn't it been able to reach out to the people that it would kind of claim to kind of have more connection with, which would be like the working class, the poor, as well as those who need equal representation, who are sort of on the margins of culture. And so really it's about like culture versus economics almost. Or like I said a couple of weeks ago when we did our Dear Liberals segment, and I said, Dear Liberals, economics, not identity politics, which I guess was sort of foreshadowing Bernie's statement. But yeah, Troy, what direction did you want to take to start this conversation?
No, I'm glad we brought up Bernie's comments first, because that seems to me, and we can address this later, very different than the other critiques you normally see. It's very strange that identity politics, which is actually kind of like a hammer, the term itself. It's not really a recognized like academic term or anything. It's only ever used pejoratively, it seems to me. And so you have these critiques, one coming from more the center, like the one that kind of set it off this week was Mark Lilla's op-ed in the New York Times. And what was the name of it again? Identity politics and...
The end of identity liberalism.
Yeah, that's right. And his critique in that editorial was basically that the Democrats screwed themselves by focusing on identity politics. And because of that, they didn't focus on economics and lost the white working class since they were excluded from the identity politics discussion. And then their revenge came in the form of their own identity politics with the right, which seems like kind of a weird contradiction or tension in the argument. But anyway, that's kind of from the center. And you hear the same or similar critique from the kind of radical left. Like you have the Jacobin magazine types who are arguing in a sense that this focus on identity politics is also obscuring the class divisions and economic issues that should unite the white working class with Black and Latino working class people together. And instead of uniting those groups as a coalition, it's separating them. Identity politics is separating them. And this is why Democrats are not really a party of the working class, which they need to be, which they should be. That's the sort of, if they focused on, they would be able to win elections and form coalitions and have mass movements, but they refuse to do that. And it's interesting to me that you're getting a similar critique from the center and from the left. Different goals in mind, clearly. But both saying, in a sense, that the focus on identity politics obscures the more important economic divisions and issues.
Okay, so now let's try to identify what identity politics is the best way we can. I mean, the sort of textbook definition is that identity politics is a way of gathering political alliances around social groups or cultural groups which unite people who identify with one another. So you would have, Black rights, or you would have women's rights, or you would have gay rights, or you would have transgender rights, or something along those lines. So we hear about these things all the time, and those subgroupings, which are kind of cultural fabrications, are these identarian political communities that are fighting for, really, civil rights is what they're fighting for. They're fighting for equality. They're fighting for a sort of egalitarian society. And because of that, oftentimes it leads to a perceived fracture within the larger cultural community. And so the problem is whether or not that fracturing on the left, because all of these identarian movements, these fights for civil rights, they are supposedly distracting any sort of united front that could take place under different conditions if there were a sort of more hegemonic, goal-oriented trajectory, right? And so that's the question, is this diffuse sort of gathering of all of these various identities, is it actually deflating the momentum that could otherwise come about if we were to focus more on the simple economic factors of fighting against inequality or fighting against the exploitation of capital or something along those lines? And that's, I think, what kind of initiates the issue, right? But then, of course, the people on the radical left are the ones that are going to be like, well, kind of like the more pro-Marxian types of thinkers are going to be like, well, it's all about economics because economic modes of productions determine social relations. So if we have a more egalitarian set of economic relations, then we will have a more egalitarian set of social relations, and then identity politics and the civil rights that those within identity politics they're fighting for, they will follow suit because of the increased flourishing of economic relations. But then, of course, people on the right, they bitch about identity politics, like you said, and as a sort of hammer, right? That it's sort of just a bunch of people whining about them not getting equal treatment, but really they're asking for preference. They're asking for special treatment. So that's the argument from like Bill O'Reilly and, fucking douche Limbaugh and stuff like that, right? That's what they argue, that's what it is, that it's sort of just a bunch of whining people who are not getting the special treatment that they want, and they're entitled brats, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, within those two kind of poles is a kind of large swath of different ideas on how to kind of understand the fight for civil rights in egalitarian communities and flourishing communities, blah, blah, blah.
And then in a weird twist of fate, you have the rise of the alt-right movement / white supremacy, because that's what it is, where it's a new kind of identity politics, right? Where you have the chief strategist for the president and Steve Bannon, who basically has, in the past made cases that white people are genetically superior in no uncertain terms to other people.
Right.
And that we would have a better... if we had a nationalist movement that focused on, say, only allowing property owners to vote, we'd have a better nation. And calling himself an economic nationalist instead of a white nationalist.
Right. Well, because the cover-up with him and even Richard Spencer, the guy that leads what's it called? The National Policy Institute, or I think that's what it's called. That people have kind of, he's the one that gave that speech that was like, hail Trump and hail all this shit, and people were doing the Zig Heil and stuff. I watched a couple of long interviews with him on the Gavin McInnes show. If you've ever seen who that guy is, he's the guy that like invented hipsterdom. He was one of the founders of Vice back in the 90s or the early 2000s or something like that. 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. But anyway, he's become sort of like he's a conservative, controversial type of figure guy. But anyway, they basically, Bannon and Spencer, they don't argue for quote unquote whiteness, they'll say, but it's the superiority of European culture, which is really interesting because this is
it really interesting?
Well, I mean, interesting in the sense that they're using that as a cover, right? Because it's sort of the same 18th century logic or 17th century logic of liberalism that was used to justify colonial exploitation and imperialism in that time. And they're trying to refabricate it now under a 21st century cover. But the difference is a lot of people, I don't think they see that that's the same sort of, it's that same sort of supremacist holdover from then, that European culture is far more advanced. European civilization is far more advanced. We are the next step on the rung of the ladder heading towards, I don't know, superiority, or I don't know what the next step of evolution will be. And that's basically what they're arguing, except they're trying to use it in a very sort of sly, hidden way. Now, it's not as sly as maybe because some people are calling them out on it, but I think a lot of people are kind of buying it. It's gaining traction. The fact that it's all over the fucking news right now, but that it isn't just being outright identified as what it is, which is just straight up racism, shows that there is something sort of insidious about this logic that they're perpetuating.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been there, but it's just come to the surface now because it's being normalized. Now that it's in the public discourse.
And now that it's in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, fucking scary, right? But to get back to identity politics, with all that kind of historical stuff in tow now, my feeling, and you can respond to this and tell me if you think I'm on the right track or whatever, but is that there seems to be something very, very wrong about the critiques and something very, very right about them at the same time. I guess we can start with maybe the very, very right. And I especially think Bernie, even though he's talking more to the public, did a better job of saying that identity politics, or focus on identity in our politics on its own, or as like a sole issue, like a single issue maybe even, is problematic. And you can see that in the diversity, quote unquote, of Trump's cabinet picks, where we have a woman who's going to have the Secretary of Education, or have the Secretary of Education job. A woman who also happens to be like a person who's going to try to destroy education, most likely, who has no public experience in education and hates teachers and the public idea of public education in general. Or Ben Carson heading the housing departments, or whatever. That's a somewhat diverse cabinet, probably more than people expected, in that we would expect to have an all-white male cabinet under Trump, and yet that does not improve things whatsoever. In fact, it even can possibly make it worse because he has this cover of now, I have a diverse cabinet. When the people who are going to be making decisions are going to make decisions that are not good for everybody else. And that was kind of the point that Bernie Sanders was making, right? That it's not helpful to have diversity if that diversity covers over the more important issues at the root of that. Now, that does seem very true. At the same time, the idea that identity politics is not an issue, or that civil rights, which is really what should come down to, is not an issue. It's just, I mean, that's like atrocious, right? Of course this is an issue. Look at the alt-right. Clearly, civil rights issues are at the forefront again and are being attacked and will continue to be attacked. I mean, yes, economic issues are sort of a bedrock, but the fact that they disproportionately affect Black and Latino Americans, and especially women of color, is extremely important. And to ignore that seems like you're ignoring a very important part of how this social stratification actually occurs, right?
Well, I don't know if they're ignoring it. I actually think they're kind of doing something even more grotesque. I have heard Milo Yiannopoulos and this Gavin McInnes guy and Richard Spencer actually say that they believe that white men are the most persecuted identity group in America. So it isn't that they're like ignoring identity politics or bemoaning it. They're actually appropriating it and taking it on as though this isn't like trying to shun civil rights. This is saying that their civil rights are being infringed upon or attacked because white men are the sort of most hated being or identity group in America or in the West. And that's fucking weird.
I was talking about Democrats' call to ignore it, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
No, but yeah, obviously it's insidious, this whole idea that white men are the persecuted minority or something. Yeah, as they're like occupying the White House, these same people. So persecuted.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I've never we're kind of shifting back and forth here, but the idea of, Democrats' call to ignore identity politics. I've never seen the tension. I've never understood the supposed tension between identity politics and economic justice. I've never understood why they don't perfectly complement one another. Like it doesn't seem difficult for me to also to align on the side of racial justice or gay rights or women's rights, and at the same time to fully be 100% on board with economic justice. Like, especially like when you just said, it is patently the case that minorities, particularly blacks and Latinos, are disproportionately affected by economic matters. So the idea that there are tensions within identity groups or identity communities is intimately related to the fact that there is an economic inequality or that there are economic injustices. So I've never understood why there was a tension. It seems to me, and I don't know if I'm just kind of being a bit dramatic here, but it seems to me that it's because there are a bunch of sort of like maybe Marxists or leftists that only want to talk about economics, and they have been kind of turned off by the identity stuff because they think it kind of takes attention away from the energy that could be focused at economic justice or economic issues. And I don't know if that's the case or not, but on the left, at least, why that would be an issue. And then on the right, I get it because, they're obviously going to have an adverse reaction to anyone sort of trying to take their power away, right? What do they say? For the white man, equality feels like oppression. So obviously, so that makes sense. But I've never understood why there was a fracturing or a splitting on the supposed left or center left or anything like that. Like, why is it? I've never understood it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of think we need to sort of do a genealogy or like a excavation to figure out why does this exist, because it shouldn't. Right. There's really no reason why you shouldn't see identity politics as being rooted in these economic issues and political economy issues. They should go hand in hand. I always think of as an analogy, the death of unions in America. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember where I read it, but it was sort of more of an opinion piece and a grand theory saying that a big reason why unions or interest in unions has died, other than obviously the attack of corporate
that Reagan fucked them
and government America against them, But sort of another large reason from the side of the unions is that unions really became sort of isolated. Many big trade unions really focused on betterment for themselves, which is what they should do, of course, without looking at the larger issues and sort of uniting together as a massive front for bigger social issues that everybody could get around, which would then make a mass movement possible. So, for instance, you don't have, trade unions all getting together and joining student protests. It happened a little bit during Occupy, and that was really promising. But you don't have it in the same way you had in the 19th century, for instance. Or unions getting together and saying our big issue, like, teachers unions and manufacturing unions and Teamsters and everybody else getting together and saying, we're going to join up and make a huge issue out of the minimum wage, or a huge issue out of Medicare for all, or something that everybody, whether they're in a union or not, can get behind and then support the union and see the union as a powerful ally in that fight. And unions became very isolated and focused only on getting whatever scraps from the table they can get, since they felt like they were being attacked from all ends, corporate, government, everything else. Which I don't think we should necessarily blame unions for that, or any way sort of obscure the fact that it's government and corporate interests that are making that happen. But yet see it as a vision for how could we bring unions back? Well, focus on these much more large scale issues that everyone would get behind, and so interest in unions would then be, we can see about, okay, it's important to have unions for this reason. It's a bit too obscure to say, well, wages are stagnant in large part because of the death of unions. Yeah, it's certainly true, but it's hard to get that as a rallying cry for, the 80% of people who have no access to a union.
Right.
And that's as an analogy for sort of this whole identity politics thing, right? If you take identity politics and you make it a sole issue, like a single issue, just to get diversity, for instance, that's great. Diversity is good. Joining a single union is good. Absolutely. Having more women on corporate boards is better than not. Absolutely. Affirmative action is a good thing. It's not like it's a Band-Aid on cancer, like some people say. No, it's actually a good thing. It equates to more access for people. But when you don't root that in the economic and political economy issues and social issues that are underneath all of that and that cause those fractures, then it sort of, you shouldn't be surprised when it kind of dies out and people aren't interested anymore. It's not a uniting factor when it's seen as a sole issue. Whereas I think if you saw the civil rights issues as married to the economic issues, that's something that I think people could unite on and could say, this is a massive issue and we want to have diversity, but we want it to be rooted in economic equality as well. And that seems to be more of what Bernie's talking about, I would think.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting, in Ireland right now, there is a lot of momentum behind a couple of small left organizations, one that's called People Before Profits and the other that's called the Anti-Austerity Alliance, and they tend to do a lot of work together. And they have what are called TDs that are in their local government, which are basically the equivalent of like ministers of parliament or house, like representatives in America, right? And so they actually have representatives for these parties in the government. So there's some usefulness there. But they are a very left-minded group of individuals. And obviously Ireland's a lot smaller, so membership in terms of percentage-wise is, if you have 20,000 members, that's much more effective than 20,000 in a country that has, 320 million or whatever America has, 350 million or something like that. But so in Ireland, though, People Before Profits, some of the things I've only hung out with, gone to a couple of different events. I'm actually supposed to go tonight to someone's house. We're going to be talking about Marxist revolutions, right? And this is a political party. And they have people at the city council. The guy that's going to pick me up and give me a ride is a part of the city council, and we're going to this meeting to talk about Marxist revolutions. But one of the things is at our last meeting that we had at the pub, literally right across from my house, which is another wonderful thing that's where they do business. But was that they gave out flyers for events. One was for a Repeal the Eighth event, which in Ireland, the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution here, I think they would call it an amendment to the Constitution, outlaws abortion 100% across the board under all conditions, even if the life of the mother is threatened, right? And so there's this real push to repeal that law. So People Before Profit, Anti-Austerity Alliance, and various other sort of leftist organizations, they're all supporting that. Another thing that People Before Profits, another event that they gave out a flyer for, was the legalization of medical marijuana, which is a big deal over on this side of the world because in the UK and in Ireland, marijuana is still viewed as like a serious drug for whatever reason. Whereas, we're from California, so for us, it's legal recreationally, but we just kind of grew up around it being a fucking plant, so it wasn't a drug, so to speak, right? But so you've got legalization of drugs, you've got women's rights, and then the big thing that they were doing is we all were going to go. We haven't gone yet, but we're going to go to the largest factory in Dublin, which is a unionized factory, and we're going to hand out flyers to basically try to inform the union workers how they can organize and get together with their union boss to fight for a wage raise. Now, these are all different things. I mean, we've got the identity politics, you've got legalization of drugs, you've got economic issues, you've got unions all working together, and the idea is trying to unite all of them together under a common banner. And it seems to make sense. It doesn't seem to be an issue. And when I talk with the people that are a part of PBP, they actually look at me like they don't understand why there is such a fracturing of the left in the United States. It's really interesting. And maybe it's just because of scale and because we're more of a melting pot. And so we have more identity conflict. And obviously, because of the history of racial injustice and things like that have kind of also been related to that have persisted for a longer period of time. Maybe that's why it's a little more tense. But it is interesting to sort of see and to be a part of genuine leftist movements that are both interested in the civil rights from the perspective of what we would call identity politics, but then also economic justice, and that there is no conflict and that there is no tension. And so it's been a really interesting learning experience for me to kind of see how it works and how they look at me, and they just kind of assume that, of course, if you fight for workers' rights, you're also going to fight for women's rights. And of course you're also going to fight for, the legalization of marijuana to be used medicinally. They're like, of course that happens. Of course. It's not even an issue, Whereas for us, it seems like it is much harder, like you said, to get unions to be on the side of, civil rights or black rights or racial justice or women's rights or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is it really that America has such a long history of racial tension?
Well, I don't know about long, but we ended slavery a lot later than like the UK did, for example, right?
Yeah, not by choice, by force.
Right.
So that's a bit different, right?
yeah, and maybe that's it.
Yeah, it just seems like it's just more complicated here in the sense that, I don't know, we had that racial stratification in inner cities. It's different than a lot of other places, and I guess geographically even, you have this tension between urban and rural, which, Ireland has that too, but because it's a smaller country, it's not as widespread, right?
Right.
Historically, the left is going to be about both those issues, and they're equal, and they're seen as symbiotic in a lot of ways, right? The economic tensions produce a lot of the civil rights issues, and then those solving the civil rights issues is going to go hand in hand with fixing the economic problems. And it just seems like in America, it's almost like you have to pick and choose. Is there some part of this that's about soundbite culture? You kind of have to, if you're going to be on a political platform, you have to choose one issue to be your single issue. So Bernie is just about economic equality, and that's it. And so he's just not going to get as much of the Black and Latino vote because of that. And you just have to focus on identity politics issues instead of economic equality if you want to get those votes. That seems to be what what some of the criticisms are saying. Like, you have to choose one or the other. And since you alienated the white working class by focusing on identity politics issues, you got to go back to economics.
Which is interesting because Bernie, I mean, there are fucking pictures of him chained as he was an activist fighting for racial justice in, the 60s. Like, he's literally chained up with black protesters. So, obviously, he cares about racial equality.
Well, of course he does. And that, can produce some of that cult of personality stuff that exists around him. But the idea of, we can't form a mass movement in America, it seems to me. Like, there's so much emphasis on there can be no mass movements. There can only be a candidate. And you have to rally around that person. And a candidate can only be about one single issue, really, when it comes down to it. And Clinton's issue was status quo. America is already great. the worst fucking tagline in the history of like PR ever. And then Bernie's is, economic populism, but from the left. And that's it. And so you have to choose one thing or other. And Trump's is the white nationalism thing.
Well, that's what's nice about this the group that I've kind of gotten involved with over here, is that they don't seem to be single issue party. They seem to be dispositionally oriented to the leftist cause, which is a seeking justice and equality wherever it needs to be met. And they seem to be open to information. Like literally, we spent the first hour and they actually were talking about the Trump election, but they just wanted to learn more about it. So they actually had a person that gave a little presentation on it. And then, of course, me as the token American guy that was there, I kind of like talked about, my experience of it and shit like that. But they just wanted to learn. And then the conversation morphed. And, of course, they had bullet points and things that they wanted to address. But the first hour was literally just about learning. And so there was something really refreshing about that. It was an educational experience insofar as they were seeking to figure out how they could better orient themselves towards the greater cause of seeking justice and equality wherever and however they could. And to me, that was something that was really refreshing. And that there's got to be a way to translate that into the United States. I mean, I know the country's bigger geographically and in terms of population, but there's got to be a way to be able to do that where you are dispositionally aligned simply towards seeking justice wherever and however, rather than just, I don't know, maybe it's because we're so fucking comfortable, Even when we're uncomfortable, we're still fucking comfortable in America.
Nah, man, California's just got to secede.
I heard that there's a big push for that right now.
It always happens every single time a Republican wins anything.
Does it?
Yeah, it always happens. But is it just the fact that in America, because of I hate the emphasis on geography because it doesn't seem to me that scale really problematizes things. It should really make things more efficient when you get down to it, especially with the mass communication and things that we have today. But there seems to be a condition of possibility that we don't have, that we're missing, that we need to ignite in order to make this a possibility. And I don't know if this is correct, I'm just kind of bullshitting, but is politicization just that thing, just really easily and simply? The fact that when people are more apathetic, they tend to only focus on their own personal well-being. And then when they're politicized, they actually see themselves as part of a larger group and then want that group's well-being and hopefully even the larger group of everybody, the whole citizenry, looking for the well-being of everybody in that sense. But that takes more like intellectual and moral effort to do that. And given the dominance of neoliberalism of the past 30 years, that just makes lots of people apathetic. And that politicization that comes with actually caring about making a society that's more ideal and better, it needs that effort. Maybe, I guess I'm kind of hopeful that if that's the case, maybe we're seeing some of that, especially with young people who are much more politicized now than they were a month ago.
Yeah, and they're much less interested in some of the typical qualities of the American dream that maybe previous generations wanted. They're much less concerned with the house and the car and the retirement. And they're much more concerned with community and with creation and self-satisfaction or self-realization. The only thing I wonder is and of course, this goes into my research, and then I know I've talked about it like ever since I fucking watched the documentary, but something that Adam Curtis talks about is the idea of the sort of radicalization of the turn to the self as the individual isolated or atomistic essence of what it means to be human, rather than a focus on social solidarity. And if the primary essence of what it means to be a human, or if, as Margaret Thatcher said, there are no communities, there are only individuals, or no societies, there's only individuals.
And families.
Yeah, and families, thank you, yeah. If that's the dominant ideology that conditions social life, then you're right, there is a problem of conditions of possibility, because there is no condition of possibility that can cause a social eruption that will genuinely lead to any sort of cohesion. And so this is one of the things that I think is so important. We talked about it last week with the idea of the aestheticization of politics, or the aestheticization of politics and the politicization of aesthetics, is this idea of how do you politicize? How do you create that rupture? And I tend to think that you can create that rupture through identity politics as well as through political economy, right? And it's just simply about finding those antagonisms to the dominant ideologies. Any dominant ideology that is conditioned by an atomizing, individualizing narrative. And anytime you can distance yourself from that and find those pockets of solidarity, or find those pockets of equality, or find those pockets of creation and genuine innovation, then I think that those are the things that we need to sort of continue to stimulate. And that's why I still am interested in identity politics, even though I jokingly said, dear liberals, economics, not identity politics. I was being a little tongue-in-cheek. But I do think that there's still a way to create those social formations that can genuinely transform society. Because think about it. We can bitch, and I'm actually getting really tired. If I had a shitty minute in the middle of our main segment that I'm really tired of people saying 2016 is like the worst year ever. And it's like, oh, 2016, how dare you? You've taken another. Leonard Cohen died. Yeah, Leonard Cohen died. He was fucking 90 years old, man. Like, or 80-something. Like, it happens. People die every fucking year. It is the most normal thing. To be human means to die. So let's stop fucking freaking out about people that die, okay? We're all gonna die. I hate to admit it. I'm going to die. So let's stop freaking out about it. This isn't a worse year than any other year because celebrities fucking died or because Trump got elected. I'm pretty sure that when the Mongols ruled fucking China, that was a pretty shitty fucking time, man. Genghis Khan and his motherfuckers, they were fucking people up. That sucked. I would not have been down to be ruled over by him or Kublai or any of his other fucking people that came out of his seed. And apparently he had a lot of seed that he spread around. But
yeah, don't talk about your great-great-grandfather that way.
Yeah. Aren't we all actually like somehow related to the Khan legacy?
That's the theory, yeah.
That's the theory. But like, it's not the worst year ever. There's still, dude, it is normal for gay marriage to be legal in the United States. It is so normal that they didn't even run on it as one of the like primary platforms of the Republican Party, which has been one of the two key touchstone pillars that they stood on. It was that and abortion, right? They didn't even talk about gay marriage. It didn't even fucking come up. Nobody gives a fuck anymore. That's amazing. That doesn't mean that there aren't still things that we need to fight for, but I still think that my point in all this is that identity politics isn't useless. And I don't think that this vitriol and people kind of blaming identity politics, blaming the left and their focus on identity politics on what went wrong. It's mixing sufficient causes with necessary causes. And identity politics is necessary. It's not sufficient. Likewise, economics is necessary, but I don't think it's sufficient.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I think that's going to be the issue that my Marxist friends are going to disagree with me on. But they're both necessary. Neither of them are individually sufficient.
Yeah, it is possible to focus on economic issues and to obscure how they affect civil rights issues, because sometimes that can happen, right?
Yeah.
You can have an emphasis on economic issues that ends up becoming isolated and solitary and creating more and worse social stratification. And the same way that you can have identity politics, which is divorced from economic analysis and then becomes more of a kind of sideshow and
right.
good on its own, but not actually addressing any actually root issues. I always go back to Kristeva, the continental philosopher, wrote an essay I read many years ago called Women's Time. You ever heard of that or read it?
Mm-mm.
It's about feminism, and I just came into mind all of a sudden. But the argument, essentially, if I can remember correctly, is Kristeva's a radical feminist philosopher, and she was making the case that feminism should not be about making women equal to men, because that assumes that the equality in the status quo, patriarchy, is good, which it's not. So feminism should instead be about sort of imagining a better form of equality, a better social system, and then making people equal within that. So you need both of those, right? The new system, the radical reinvention of society, and then equality within that as part of it. And so that always kind of reminds, and she's kind of a deconstructionist philosopher, so she focused a lot on deconstructing the binary of male, female, and that whole thing
Right.
in the essay. But that always kind of caught me as, yeah, I mean, if you have one of these things without the other, you don't have the whole. And it's only going to, it's going to peter out at some point because it's not going to be sufficient for building a mass movement.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's one of the things that I think continually comes up is, and this is one of the problems I think with a lot of popular political and cultural discourse is, we talked a little bit about it last week, is it's basically just managing the blocks rather than rebuilding the blocks. And we're accepting the terms of the debate that are laid out before us rather than really scrapping and erasing the board and not using a pen altogether, but using a completely different writing utensil and starting completely afresh. And I think that's I know we talk about that a lot. But then, so here's my question is like, what does that mean? Like, how do we deconstruct the binary of male, female, or man, woman, I should say, in the Kristevan sense? Or how do we erase the board? How do we build afresh? Does it start with analysis, like Zizek, right? Is theory. It's all about fucking theory. Stop doing and start theorizing. Is it that? Or is it just, let's pick up bricks and start dismantling? Is it, let's organize, let's go to the trade unions? Is it just do wherever you can locally? Is it, we need to large-scale plan and small-scale plan? Is it all of this all together? Like, what the fuck is it moving forward?
Yeah, as much as Zizek is maligned right now, and we're not really allowed to say his name in public for a couple of years, it seems like, he's earned that for sure. That classic line of stop or don't act, think, which is the inverse of the stop thinking so much and just act already or do something. It's kind of important here, right? Especially from like our point of view. We're privileged white male academics, so we don't have to worry too much about if we're going to have like access to food and lodging and
clean water and shit.
Despite whatever circumstances may actually make that true for us because we're relatively poor for white male privileged academics. It's not going to compare at all to people who are actually going to be affected by, say, repealing of Obamacare or Medicaid expansion or voucher programs in education or whatever else, right? There has to be a sense in which we need to have action immediately to try to stop those things, of course. But also at the same time, to think about what is the society we want to live in, right? What is the sort of ideal form of social gathering that we want to have so that we can plan whatever more immediate means as a way to get to that. So that we don't have a situation where we just say, well, we increased affirmative action, and so that means everything's going to be okay in 7 generations when African-American people have more access to inherited wealth or networking capacity or whatever, right? Like that clearly is not thinking anything about a long-term new kind of society. So that does seem to me to be kind of important in a certain sense.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that. This is one of the things I think about a lot is like we need to kind of just simplify and just start talking with people like, what do you really want? Like really, what do you want ultimately? Do you want to just be comfortable and just have enough food and have enough water and have enough clothing and lodging so that you can survive? Ought we try to just eradicate homelessness? Ought we try to eradicate violence and exploitation and oppression? And then if that's the case, then we need to figure out how we can take the sort of like smaller micro social alienations that prevent those things, and we need to fix them so that they don't do that. And how do we fix them? Rigorous analysis, historical analysis, genealogical critique, philosophy, economics, all of these things, engineering, innovation, they can all be tools in the pursuit of those things. But I really like that you said that you kind of strip down and just get to the bare bones. What is the society that we want? And I'm such a moron that I actually believe that you can even have this conversation with people who are completely different from you. And like I can sit down with my hyper-conservative evangelical Republican friends and we can have a similar conversation, and that we might actually be able to have some sort of crossover in our ideals. I am so naive that I do think that that's possible. And I think maybe the reason that I think that is because I have kind of changed so much, and that I've had amazing, fruitful conversations with people who are very different from me. The problem is then we need to, once we do make those common connections, then we need to stimulate those common connections. But that's fucking hard because the force of ideology and the force of the control mechanisms of the social structures and the ideological state apparatuses and the larger umbrella of seriality impinges itself upon us, and it stifles that creative flow. But I do like that, and I think that's so important. It's just kind of, let's go back to being, ancient Greeks, sitting around talking, what the fuck do we want? And I think at the very least, we have enough resources. Let's have enough food for human fucking beings and enough water for human beings. And when large corporations from the north go to the south and they buy up all the fucking natural resources like water of a southern hemisphere country, you pause and you say, that's probably not fucking cool, When you hear statistics like the United States and the United Kingdom spend $17 billion a year on pet food alone, but you could clothe, feed, and give clean water to the entire planet for $14 billion, you start to say, there's something fucking wrong. And that doesn't mean we don't have pets. I love pets. I love them. Dogs make life better. We've talked about this. Cats, maybe sometimes, but whatever. But we love pets. I get it. But still, the point is that we have the fucking resources. Our priorities are just placed elsewhere. And I don't know. I like that idea of stripping it down and just getting to that bare bones minimum. How do we want to live our lives? What is the good society? And those are the things that there's no place for because that's not sexy. Even though I think it's sexy. But it doesn't win. Yeah. It doesn't win you a campaign.
Yeah, ancient Greece, but no slaves.
And no pederasty.
Consensual adult homoerotic stuff.
Consensual adult. Well, yeah, damn straight, dude. I'm down. When in Rome. Come on. Whatever. I'm a hedonist, man. Pleasure is pleasure is pleasure. But yeah. So anything you want to say, kind of wrapping up?
I think you put it well. I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. Hey, Bernie, we love you, man. I voted for you in the primaries.
Don't die.
You're still my boy. Don't die. Please live to be like 90-something. Just hold on for a few more years because I feel like that there's some momentum is building up behind you, brother.
And not because we need this cult built around him or anything, this cultist, but just because, I don't know, it feels like Bernie's was the ignition for this whole thing.
Yeah.
And a very large part. And so we kind of just need him to stay for a little while until we get this thing moving on its own, right? He's kind of like the car that jumped us, and so now we gotta keep that revving for a couple minutes before we can go on our own.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, so for our next segment, we have our Sticky Leaves. This is the segment where one of us talks about what's giving us meaning in a universe devoid of meaning and significance. This week, Austin has it. So what you got?
Well, before I get into my thing, I actually wanted to say something. At the conference that I was at a few weeks ago for the North American SART Society, I was standing around having some beers talking with some young researchers, and we were talking about the podcast, and they were talking about the Sticky Leaves segment. And this one guy came up mid-conversation, and he says, Brothers Karamazov, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, that's my favorite book of all time. And I was like, oh, that's Troy's favorite book of all time. He's like, right on. So I just had to share that. But because I forgot to tell you about it. But so my Sticky leaf for this week is Adam Ruins Everything. Troy, did you check out any of the Adam Ruins Everything?
I haven't yet, but I'm planning on it.
Okay, so Adam Ruins Everything is started off as a college humor sketch series, and it has since been picked up by True TV, and it's turned into like a half-hour full-on comedy series. But it's an educational comedy series where Adam Conover, who was actually a philosophy major when he was an undergrad, he basically he explores contemporary landscape and received assumptions within American culture, and he ruins them by kind of exposing their idiocy or the way in which they were constructed or the superficiality of them or whatever. And it is like one of my favorite little series on television or on the internet right now. Now, I know the way that I just sold it makes it sound like he's just an asshole who walks around and is just negative, but he's really not, because he's kind of this charming, very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, youthful, spirited explorer. And so, for example, I will talk about one of the segments. There is a young man on the beach, and he's about to propose to his girlfriend. And as soon as he does, Adam Conover appears, and all of a sudden they look at him and they're like, "Oh no, are you going to ruin this for us?" And he's like, "Yes, I am." He's like, "You know how we think that proposing and that the wedding ring or the engagement ring, I'm sorry." He's like, "You know how we think that the engagement ring is this like time-honored tradition that's been with us forever and blah, 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 and it's this thing that's amazing that we're all supposed to do." He's like, "Actually, that's not. Let's go into the history of why the engagement ring became what it became." And he talks about how actually it was just a creation of the De Beers Diamond Corporation that they put forth as a marketing ploy to sell more diamonds. So the whole idea that diamonds are forever and that diamonds are really valuable. Adam basically says, actually, no, they're intrinsically worthless, and they're only valuable because the De Beers Corporation has a monopoly over the diamond supply. And so he goes off and he kind of explores this whole thing. But then at the end of it, it isn't to basically make you be like, oh, fuck, well, then I guess that nobody should ever get engaged ever again. But it's about educating and about sort of like reorienting us towards these things that we kind of, these practices, these customs that we just assume in American culture. And he talks about engagement rings. He talks about weddings as a whole, how they're basically just a show for the wealthy. And that's how they kind of initially always have been. Like back in, a couple hundred years ago, even 100 years ago, weddings were just very simple ceremonies. And it wasn't until corporations got involved and they really wanted to kind of sell more products that the wedding became a big thing where you had to buy big cakes and big flowers and a big dress. And the idea of the white wedding dress, that too is a fabrication. And all of these other various elements that we think now are part of the tradition of the intrinsic value of the ceremony, how they're just kind of these bullshit fabrications that really come from commercialization and from PR and various things like that. And he talks about dog breeding and why purebred dogs are actually just these poor little abused Frankenstein monsters. And he has all of these things that he explores. Why you don't need to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Why vitamins or supplemental vitamins are kind of just a ripoff just to, for companies to make profits. All these various things. And why trophy hunting can actually be a good thing sometimes, which was kind of a really weird, twisty, controversial one where you're like, what the fuck? But check out these videos. It's a really fun series. Like I said, he's not just this grumpy Gus. He's actually very fun and he's very charismatic. And at the end of each episode, he tries to end it on like a positive note. So like the one with the purebred dogs, the woman at the end is like, oh, what? So you're saying, fine, I should just never own a pet and that pets are terrible and we should never have dogs? And he's like, no, of course I'm not saying that. He's like, animals give us meaning and they make us feel better. He's like, but maybe there's a better way to do it. Rather than sending our money to these breeders who are basically genetically modifying these little Frankenstein monsters and giving them all of these like weird diseases and weird genetic problems, go to the shelter and rescue an animal and get a mutt because they're the ones that are actually a little bit more genetically healthy and they don't have those weird diseases because they're not all inbred and shit like that. So there's always like a positive spin. But it's a really interesting series. I fucking love it. It's entertaining as shit. They're about like 2.5 to 5 minutes long. And then, of course, on True TV, there's like the full half-hour segments. But I think that's a new thing. They're just in their first season right now. But check it out. Adam Ruins Everything on YouTube. Super fun, interesting, and I just kind of enjoy it. So, yeah.
It sounds kind of like Michel Foucault walking around genealogizing everything.
That's exactly what it is. Except he's like this nerdy, early 30-something comedy writer.
So you're saying basically he presents it better than a bald French homosexual.
Well, I don't know, man. I'm like when Foucault's debate with Chomsky, he definitely presents it much better than Foucault did. Foucault was a bit of an asshole. He used to like to fight people, and apparently he got into fistfights all the time. So yeah, Adam Conover is not an asshole. Even though Michelle, if your ghost is watching me, I dig you too, brother. Don't stab me like you did your college friend or whatever.
A pretty face on genealogy, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It's really fun, and it's funny, and it's quirky, and they're little sketches. So
not to psychoanalyze, but I'm getting a hint of, like, envy, possibly? Is this maybe the life you wanted to live?
Brother,
you can combine film, philosophical genealogy, your charisma, and all that together in one package?
I would absolutely. Adam Conover, if you're listening to this podcast and you need a producer, yeah, you got me. You want someone in Dublin? I'll do an Irish version. Let's go.
Yeah, producer, and then all of a sudden, somehow, Adam comes with a debilitating disease. And who's there to take his place? Austin Schmidt.
Hey, I was just feeding him my special recipe with a little cyanide. It's okay. But yeah, check it out, Troy.
You sold me. I'm gonna go check it out for sure now.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. I really dig it. I think the biggest thing is that I know it might sound like it's negative, but it's not. It's actually really positive, and it's actually made me really happy watching them. And I went deep down the rabbit hole, so I watched like 40 or 50 of these fucking videos over a couple of days. So it's good shit, man. All right, sweet. So now we are going to transition to bullshitting. And Troy came up with the most bullshitty of bullshitting topics for the week.
Oh, you're blaming me, huh?
No, I'm giving you credit. I'm quoting you. I'm citing you.
Okay, yeah. Semantics.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what's the most bullshitty thing we could possibly bullshit about? And given that it's November, or the end of November, it's got to be the weather, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the weather is changing. I'm here in Southern California, and it's actually cold.
Yeah,
It happens every year for a couple of weeks, but I'm still surprised whenever it happens.
Especially up where you're living, because where you're living, it's a little bit colder than, say, by the beach.
Yeah, desert.
Yeah, you're a little bit more deserty than, like, where I'm from, which is more in Orange County, by the water, which just doesn't quite get as cold. You actually might get a little snow.
I'm not sure about that. It's been a long time since we've had any snow here. But it's definitely getting cold, and there's the occasional rain. But even down in, like, Orange County, I think it was pretty cold. I mean, relatively speaking, the past week or so.
Yep. Now, real quick, before we actually bitch about the weather, can we bitch about how people bitch about the weather?
Meta bitching?
Yeah. So, like, one of my least favorite things is when you meet somebody or when you're in a setting with somebody or you see someone that you've known, I don't know, for 20 years, and, like, the first thing that they ask you is, like, how's the weather where you're at? I'm like... I live in Dublin, man. It's fucking gray and cold and rainy. It's always gray and cold and rainy.
It's very consistent and predictable.
Yeah, you're in Southern California. It's probably warm and sunny and nice. Let's not talk about the weather. Let's talk about, like, other shit. But it is funny that why do we give a fuck? Why do we always ask people about the weather?
Yeah, I know. Why is it that whenever you have nothing else to talk about, that's the thing you go to? Why not, like, yeah, how about that oncoming proletarian revolution, right? Down with that.
See,
why don't production? No, it's like, oh, it's a fucking nice day outside.
Uh-huh.
We need to,
wow,
like,
it's really nice out, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to, like, unnormalize. Is that a word? Denormalize?
Abnormalize?
That small talk, abnormalize. That small talk is first and foremost about the weather. There needs to be a different small talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we like to take pictures and share it as well, right? Like, oh, it's a lovely day today, and I've done this. I do this sometimes. Why do I do this? I hate it, and I still do it.
Take a picture of the skyline.
I've done that before.
You can look outside.
Yeah, but you send it to somebody else.
But they can look outside. Literally.
Yeah.
As of this point, at least, we have not privatized the sky.
Well, I do, but that's the point.
It's publicly owned. It's the commons.
But that's the point. We're taking a picture and we're saying, hey, look how beautiful it is. And then they can look outside and they can be like, oh, wow, it really is beautiful.
Oh, so it's just like a causal mechanism.
Yeah.
It's just a pointer.
Yeah, but it's the same thing as saying, how's the weather? It's the same thing about you talking about the weather, except we do it digitally now. We take a video of it snowing, and we're like, oh, it's snowing, and we send it to a friend, and they're like, oh my god, I know it's snowing. And you're like, oh, cool. It's the same.
That kills me, man. That's like people who, like, video record when they're at a concert. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? Your video's gonna suck compared to the actual aesthetic experience. Like, rely upon your memory, yo. You have that. You have memory.
Adam ruins that he talks about that all of your memories from childhood are really just figments of chemical creations in your brain, and they're not actually genuine memories, which obviously you and I understand because we've studied consciousness quite a bit. But yeah, exactly.
Which is also great.
That is great. Yeah,
because then you get to have new memories, literally new memories, because they're not memories of things you've actually experienced. It's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if you watched your favorite movie and every time the director themselves changed a little bit to make it cooler.
That'd be fucking awesome.
That sucks so bad. No, of course, it's amazing.
That'd be so cool.
Hey, what if I watched Big Lebowski and every single time I watched it, Joel and Ethan Coen went in and put a new Easter egg in there, and I had to try to find it? That'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. All right. Well, now that we've done our meta bullshitting, how's the weather there, Troy?
Oh man, it's you should see it. I'm gonna take a picture and send it to you.
You're such an asshole.
Blue skies, but it's kind of chilly. Reminds me a lot of Scotland, actually.
Oh, yeah?
In the summer.
Yeah, in the summer, right?
Yeah, a winter day in California is basically like a summer day in Scotland.
Exactly. Yeah. It has been cold here, and then it got warmer, but it's still cold. Is that? I mean, is that? I don't really know what else to say. I do like a white Christmas because I never get a white Christmas, so I enjoy seeing a white Christmas. Is that talking about the weather, or is that different?
That is, I always felt the same way, and then I had a white Christmas when I lived in Scotland, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this.
No, but you didn't just have a white Christmas. You had a white like 4 months.
Yeah, that's true.
Or 3 months. And the year that you were here was the year of the big freeze too, wasn't it?
Is that what they called it? I don't remember they called that.
It was, yeah, because I remember, because I moved a year after you, right, to England?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the year that you were there was like a 3-year stretch where it was like the worst snow that the UK had gotten in like 100 years. And I think you were there the first year of it. Because then I was there in England for the second year of it. And then I moved to Scotland and I got the third year of it. And I remember every time I moved, I was like, hey, do you guys get snow here? And they're like, oh, yeah, but it doesn't stick. And then it was like fucking snowpocalypse, man, where there wasn't even bread in the grocery stores because it was so fucking snowy because they couldn't get deliveries and shit like that. But, yeah. No, I like a white Christmas, or at least I like watching movies where they have a white Christmas, and then I can romanticize about the white Christmas.
Yeah, that's better. Vicariously experience it. I'm done with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, enjoy the weather in Southern California, even though it's cold. Relatively cold.
I am. I mean, it's weird because it feels different, but it always looks the same.
It's always still sunny.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I know that the Earth is tilted and shit like that. It's because we're further away from the sun. But it still blows my mind that it's just as sunny as it would be. And maybe the sun's not as high in the sky as it would be, obviously. But that's always weird to me. It could be just as sunny, but it's like 40 degrees colder. Science.
Do you think anybody is still listening to this?
No.
If you are, drop us a line at owlsatdawnpodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think of the weather bullshitting segments.
Yeah, and tell us about the weather where you're at. You know what? As a matter of fact, you know what we would love? Send us pictures of the weather wherever you are.
Dude, tweet us at owls_at_dawn on Twitter. Or tag us on. Can you tag people on Instagram? Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, you can tag people on Instagram.
Pictures of the weather outside.
Yeah.
So that we can like retweet them and annoy everybody who's following us.
Yeah, that's right. What if we just flooded Instagram with just like mundane... Oh, that's what Instagram is. Never mind. All right, cool. Well, on that note, let's kick it over to Michael for This Week in Hip Hop. Tribe? One day?
We getting Tribe?
Are we gonna? Point? I don't think so. But
we're just going to be like endless Derridean deferral forever.
Yeah. Remember how when he said like there will never be new Frank Ocean? Maybe there will never be a new review of the Tribe album from Michael.
Yeah, it's the Messiah.
We're waiting for Godot.
With first class legroom, big cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up, friends? This is This Week in Hip Hop with Michael Burns on the Owls of Dawn podcast. You know that because you're listening to it. This Week in Hip Hop, what's been going on? Not a ton, to be honest. And because not a ton that I'm excited about has been happening this week, I'm going to talk to you about something really exciting that happened on this week a damn decade ago, which is the release of Clipse's sophomore album, Hell Hath No Fury. It is the 10-year anniversary this week. I don't know about you, that makes me feel old as fuck because I distinctly remember when that record came out. In particular, I distinctly remember the day, October 1st, 2006, when the first single, Mr. Me Too, was released from that record. And I obviously had been a fan of Clipse since I was in high school with Lord Willin'. I spent a lot of days around a lunch table where someone kind of beat out the grinding beat with their fist, and we took turns freestyling. I almost just did it for you, but if I say grinding and that beat doesn't initially come into your head, I know that we have a fundamental difference, maybe an ontological difference, but whatever. But so some of you might know this, but between Lord Willing and Hell Hath No Fury, 4 years go by. A bunch of label shit was going down. The crackers were not playing fair at Jive, as we all know. But I remember when Mr. Me Too came out, like that was one of the most mind-blowing tracks for me at that period of my life. The video was so ill. The production was just so good. The lyrics were so hard. And I remember then just being excited for the release of this album on November 28th. I remember staying up till midnight when you could sort of do the thing. I'm sure you could still do this, where you could download shit on iTunes at midnight. And I remember it's a record that I knew I needed to be in my car for. So I immediately downloaded the record and just drove around in my car because I wanted to hear the bass on it. Later, I ended up asking one of my roommates at the time that had a car with a really nice bass system. It was a little Scion that had dope bass. I remember just wanting him to drive everywhere so I could grab the aux cord and put on Mr. Me Too. But either way, this is an exciting record. And it's one that I think a lot of people, and I don't want to condescend to anyone, but a lot of people I know have gotten into rap in the last few years. That's really great. And a lot of people have really gotten into Pusha T ever since Pusha T popped up on, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy with Kanye. And a lot of people I know that are into Pusha T don't have this background of knowing where he came from. He came from Clipse. He came from Virginia. He came from working with his brother Malice. So I just want to talk a little bit about this record and say why it's so great. And then just encourage you, if you never were into the Clipse or never were into Hell Hath No Fury, to take some time this week and go back and listen to it. So first things first about this record. Sorry, I sipped coffee. I need energy for you. But first thing about this record is the whole thing's produced by the Neptunes. So this is still from an era where you could have the quality of the Neptunes producing your entire record. So it gives the whole album a musical consistency from start to finish. Now, of course, the Neptunes have an insane amount of range, but there is an aesthetic that drives this whole record that was completely new at the time. And it was even new for the Neptunes to hear this particular sound. So a lot of really dark tones, a lot of that minimalism that they had on Lord Willin', but with a kind of darker melodic pitch on a lot of things. And the album, of course, just starts off so strong with the We Got It for Cheap intro. Listen to that if you haven't in a while. And then the record just goes on, I think, one of the craziest 4-song runs, maybe even 5-song runs on any album of the past decade. So we have Mama, I'm So Sorry, into Mr. Me Too, into Wamp Wamp featuring Slim Thug, and that one, Jesus. The sort of string hit samples on that one. Then Ride Around Shining, that has this really dark string sample on it, has Abliva on it as well. And then into Dirty Money, which manages to be one of the most sort of melodically uplifting tracks on the record, but is, of course, about dirty money and the things entailed. And there's even some stuff on that record that's, I don't know if I want to say ahead of its time, but just different. I remember the first time I heard Trill, I thought it was terrible. But after repeated listens, I realized it wasn't terrible. There was something going on production-wise that was just different. And something that was almost pulling from an 80s techno type sound. And it was working so good. Lyrically, too. And this is something about Clipse that, for me, as someone that was, always more into traditional East Coast hip-hop, something I found really interesting about Clipse is, you took two dudes that were lyrically incredible, verbally dexterous, incredible with the wordplay, great with the cadence, just two rappers, but who were talking about a sort of content and sort of, coke dealing and the world around that. That was a type of content that for a while in hip-hop, especially in the 2000s, had kind of split off and been a lot of really kind of bad, corny, fake bragging drug rap. So the Clipse really represent that mixture of some dudes that are talking about dealing narcotics, but with a lyricism that matched any of the best rappers that were currently out. And of course, I think that at the time, maybe Clipse didn't even get enough credit for the fact that they were two of the best rappers out. Now, of course, we've gotten to see that Pusha T is sort of, if not in a league of his own, one of the top people currently rapping words. God, and there's just so many good lyrics too. I remember the first time I heard Mr. Me Too, the line that says, "Keep the money right or end up in the trunk taped up," just thinking shit, that might have been a real thing that happened. Someone might have legitimately not kept the money right, and these two brothers put them in the trunk taped up, and that was terrifying. But I still liked it. And yeah, and it was kind of the end of the era of this record, because after this, I mean, they did end up putting out Till the Casket Drops, which really wasn't the same. Had some good tracks on it, but Malice became No Malice and found Jesus. Pusha T found Yeezus. That was corny, and I hate myself for saying it, but I did, and I'm not going to change it. There's rumors that they might get back in the studio. I guess that would be cool, but it's great that these guys gave us two of the best records of the past 15 years. Hell Had No Fury is still in my mind an almost perfect record. I highly recommend you go back and give this one a listen if you haven't in a long time. And yeah, man, that's it for me this week. Hell Had No Fury, Clipse, 10-year anniversary, happy anniversary. Oh, and if you get a chance, there's been some good writing about it this week, but Shea Serrano on The Ringer wrote a wonderful thing that's like 47 life lessons he learned from Hell Hath No Fury. Please listen to that, because it's incredible. My favorite part of which is he imagines someone saying to Pusha T, "Why are you trill?" and Pusha T looking at them with dead eyes and saying, "So many things make me trill." But that's it. Have a good week. This Week in Hip Hop. I'm going to be back at you soon. Stay away from seasonal depression if you got it. Enjoy the sun if you have access to it. Eat your vegetables. I'm out.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling.
All right, welcome back, and thank you, Michael, for that. Talking about Clipse, Hell Hath No Fury. You listen to that album much, Austin?
No, man. No, I was just listening to the Mr. Me Too track right before we got on, but I was not familiar with Clipse at all. I think I maybe have heard the name before, but I didn't know shit. I didn't know that was where Pusha T came from. I'm one of those guys that found Pusha T through Kanye. So, yeah, I had not heard anything by them until about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, man, I think Mike had mentioned it on a previous episode of This Week in Hip Hop, but I hadn't really listened to a whole lot, so I'm going to have to go ahead and do that now.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And I do like his little pithy, the one brother found Jesus and Pusha T found Yeezus.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty nice little couplet, right?
Yeah. Well, I just want to know if it was off the cuff or if it was something that he'd written down like all week. He's like, I got a nice little pithy remark here that I'm going to say. I don't know.
That almost sounds like a Yeezy line, doesn't it?
It does sound like a Yeezy line. It does a little bit, right? Oh, God. Like some sort of brag, right? How he's probably better than Jesus, though, right? Like Malice is no Malice because he found Jesus, but Pusha T became a god because he found Yeezus. Of course, I don't want to mock poor Kanye. He seems to be going through some weird shit, man. I didn't realize that it was such a thing, and then Michael was like, yeah, last week he's like, our thoughts are with Kanye, and then I keep seeing these fucking articles pop up that are like people around him saying they don't know what's wrong with him, and he's having all of these like psychotic breakdown issues, so I don't know. I don't want any human to be freaking out like that, especially when they're dealing with psychological shit. So
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of like the new Yeezy or anything, but get help, yo.
Yeah,
glad to see that.
You seriously get help, and don't run for president.
Or do. I don't really care at this point.
I don't really care anymore. We live in the world of the Matrix, so it's just the fucking world of hyper reality. It doesn't even matter anymore. Let's just magnify the images and throw them around. Fuck it.
Speaking of fucking it, Austin, I have a question for you.
Okay, I got an answer.
Do you think we're cucks?
I'm sure Richard Spencer would say so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really give a fuck about what he thinks, but
yeah.
Like, are we? I mean, what's your digit ratio, Austin? Do you know?
What do you mean by digit ratio?
Your digit ratio.
I don't know what that means.
Look at your hand.
My hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at
Is
my
your
hand.
Is your index finger or your ring finger longer?
Oh, my index finger or my ring finger's longer?
By a lot or a little?
It's noticeable.
Yeah, me too.
So does that mean we're cucks?
That means we're not cucks.
Oh, is that how they determine it?
Well, I don't know what they do, but
This is biological, is what you're saying.
part of it.
See, I thought that cuck... First of all, can I just say that word is the dirtiest non-dirty word, I think, in the English language. Cuck. It sounds like a mix between cunt and fuck. And now I know it's short for cuckold, but when I hear the word cuck, I automatically I feel like I'm in Glasgow and I'm listening to my homies drop the C-bomb all over the place. Because it's just, for some reason, it tastes bad coming out of my mouth. You know?
Yeah, it's a pretty ugly sounding word.
It's a harsh fucking word,
Just
man.
in general. Cuckold
But
is
you know what-
hilarious sounding, though.
But you know what cuckold is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that what cuck is
watching
short
your
for?
girl get plowed by a giant black dude or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, isn't that what cuck is short for?
Yeah. But, it's used by some as a general epithet for any left-leaning folk who are effeminate and emasculated,
Oh, because we're effeminate and emasculated. We like to watch other dudes fuck our chicks.
basically. But in a geopolitical sense.
Oh, okay. Cool. So geopolitically, who is fucking my girl? Who's my girl in this analogy?
Save that for a future episode.
My strength and my capacity and my vitality and my freedom
Something like that.
and the liberal agenda, like all the feminazis and the regressive left, they're the ones that are fucking my freedom? Is that how the metaphor plays out?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably something along those lines. I'm not sure I want to spend enough mental energy to think about it.
Well, dude, like I say, man, I'm a hedonist, so I'm down for pleasure anywhere. So if that's how I derive pleasure, fuck it, I don't care.
If you like being a cuck, then, cuck it. Cuck around.
That's right. Just do it actively, not reactively in the Nietzschean sense.
It makes sure it's the flow of your own desire, right?
That's right. God, even saying the word, it grosses me out. Let's never say the word cuck on this podcast after this outro, please.
Yeah, we won't. And also, that won't be like our previous promises. We probably will actually keep this one.
Yeah. Oh, God. That word is so gross, man. I don't know. It reminds me, there's a College Humor sketch where it was a bunch of them sitting around talking about words that sound like slurs, but that aren't slurs, like niggardly, and like you can use the word chink if you're talking about the chink in your armor and stuff like that. And it's like all of these words that's like, hey, it depends on the context. And even just saying them, it's like, oh, it does kind of, I don't know, I guess activate my my sensibilities a little bit.
Yeah, the disgust mechanisms come in with anything close to them.
I know. So, and cuck is definitely one of them, man. It should be added to that. It sounds like a slur, but it's not a slur. I love it. I also love how in mainstream media now, this is the only time I've ever heard words like cuck and pussy actually get talked about on like CNN.
And they're in the headlines at the bottom line of the screen.
I love it, man. I love it. It's Anna Navarro. Do you know who she is, right?
Uh-huh.
She was the one who I think she said it. She dropped it on like some CNN panel, and she was the first person, and everyone, you could see their eyes. They were like, "Oh, I can't believe she just said that." And then from that point on, people just started throwing it around all the time. I was like, "Wow, people are just dropping the pussy bomb all over national television." Okay, right on.
It's a brave new world, man.
It is a brave new world. Oh, well, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Owls at Dawn, y'all. You can find us on Twitter, owls_at_dawn. Same handle on Instagram. We'd also love to hear from you on our iTunes store. Shoot us a 5-star review. That'll really help get the podcast out. And thank you for tuning in and participating in the conversation, whatever that means, to whatever extent that means. And Troy, anything you got to say?
You know what I got to say? Das Vidania, Amerikanski.